Hey, this is Big John here, welcoming you to the inaugural edition of The Way I See It Sports, and we will be covering the Open Championship this week. A little bit before we get started, I started sports betting about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, football season. And during the off-season of football, I was looking for other sports to bet on, and I ran across golf. I've had a lot of success quantifying what's happening on the course and using that to create models to predict what's going to happen that week at the upcoming event. And I wanted to start sharing that with other people because of the success I've had. Now, before we start diving into the championship itself, this week at the Royal Portrush Golf Club in Northern Ireland, I just want to do the last week's review that we'll be doing each week, going back to the Scottish Open last week. Last week, my model had the top 8 from Scheffler to Nick Taylor, ranked in that order, and then in parentheses you see their finishing place for the tournament. A little bit of mixed results there, but Kevin Yu and Nick Taylor were way higher up going up into the third and fourth round and struggled a little bit. Happens, but could have ended up a lot better. So full disclosure, I just want to put my actual bets that I made last week. I'm a huge fan of stacking, as you'll see here, but I did a flyer on Robert McIntyre just because of his success at the event. And obviously he, did well with the model. Spawn obviously was a miss there, but Strock again, that top 10 kind of saved my week for a par there. And then like I said, Kevin Yu and Nick Taylor both kind of flubbed it down the stretch, so we didn't hit those top 20s, but if we would have, we had a very profitable week, which would have been nice. But hey, that's the way it rolls sometime. All right, so let's get back to the actual event this week. All right, the Open Championship at Royal Portrush Golf Club, excuse me. Right down here below, we have an aerial kind of Google Maps layout of the course on the north coast of Northern Ireland there. It's a par 71 with 4 par 3s, 11 par 4s, and 3 par 5s. It normally plays 4 par 5s for the members, but the par 4 11th for the event, like I said, is usually a par 5 for the members. Not a short course by any stretch of the imagination, 7,381 yards, but more importantly, super narrow fairways. Accuracy, kind of at a little bit of a premium this week. With an average width of 27 yards. Other than the average fairway width, what makes this course so difficult? Well, like many links courses, the wind is obviously a factor coming off the coast there. This week it doesn't look like the wind is supposed to be too bad, so that shouldn't be as effective. But this course plays tough because of its elevation changes. Elevation on a macro and micro sense. Elevation between the tee box and where the green is actually located. Elevation in the sense of the fairways are constantly rolling up and down. There's not very many flat spots. With that being said, that creates golf shots where you're hardly ever on level ground and your feet or the ball is either elevated in comparison to where you're swinging. The bunkers themselves super deep, very deep elevated type things. So that's part of what makes this course so difficult to go along with the wind that can affect you at a links golf course. So with that being said, the challenge of the course, it was last played, the Open Championship played here in 2019. So let's take a look at how those golfers managed this course. All right, so the 148th Open in 2019, that year played the 4th hardest course at 1.175 over par. Take a look over on the left side here. We have the leaderboard where Shane Lowry ran away with it by 6 strokes. But then, we have Tommy Fleetwood with another classic second, and then rounded out the top 10 all the way to, Robert McIntyre, Patrick Reed throughout there. So what kind of consistent metrics can we pull from the top finishers to possibly project what will help this year? So greens in regulation was the biggest thing. Tournament leader was Shane Lowry, who obviously ended up winning the tournament at 79.7%, but then also 11 of the top 14, 68% greens in regulation. Obviously, a very staggering stat. Secondly, scrambling was a big to-do that week. Fleetwood was first in scrambling, ended up second overall, and Lowry was third in scrambling and ended up winning the tournament in 6 of the top 10, above 60% scrambling. And then finally, We're going to be getting in a little bit more of that precision I was talking about, those narrow fairways. We're going to be using driving accuracy percentage as our third stat from our historical analysis. The tournament leader was Lee Westwood at 71%. He ended up finishing fourth. Xander Schauffele, even though he tied 41st this year, he led the second round in greens and regulation. Fairways hit to a 65, which is really good. The reason this one isn't quite as important as the other two stats, because we do have a little bit of a mix of in the top contenders where Justin Thomas, who finished 11th, has a 41% driving accuracy percentage, but it jumps up quite a bit from there, but there's kind of a mixed bag in there. So it's not quite as strong of an indicator as the other two. So with that being said, what does the model look like for this week? So the Royal Part Rush model is definitely precision over power, but we wanted to start with the just strokes gained total. Strokes gained is obviously a great statistic for seeing who's playing well, who has a chance to win, and those sorts of things. But since I won't be using the other strokes gained stats this week, I just wanted to start with strokes gained total, kind of give me the best performing players of a group without necessarily picking out how or why they gain their strokes. I want to just keep it very general, keep it the top players, and then the next categories will whittle out how they gain those strokes and who gain those strokes the best way for this course. So the first one we talked about before is that greens and regulation, where 11 of the 14 finished really high, and that's going to be our kind of take place of a strokes gained approach metric. That's our strokes gained approach metric. Scrambling, super important, as we saw on the previous slide. That's kind of our around the green and putting strokes gain metric. Scrambling, anytime you miss the green, if you can get up and down and make a par or better, great scrambling numbers, and it's super important at this course. And then the third one that we talked about on the previous slide, the driving accuracy, kind of like our shots gained off the tee, but a lot of strokes gained off the tee, is bombers who aren't accurate, and some of those will show up on the model still just because other parts of their game are strong and overcome that. But I didn't want to do strokes gained off the tee. I really want to reward more precision players on this course. And then we'll take the current form of the last four tourneys and base points of according to finishes, and that will determine their current form. And then finally, course history. And this is where I kind of bring in trends metrics a little more, trends of how they've done at these different tournaments, but in the sense that I'm picking certain values for certain places, certain finishes, the certain years that I'm picking. And since my model is a cumulative score, the course history, you actually get minus points off your total score for top finishes. So we're looking at 2019, the last time it was played here, and then 2023 and 24. And the reason that course history is so important for this place in the Open Championships in general is we see a trend that's developed previously, but even over the last few years. So 2019, Shane Lowry wins the event. And then there's the COVID year, and then Colin Morikawa comes out and wins it in 21. But also in 21, Cam Smith tied for 33rd. Next year, Cam Smith wins it. And while Cam Smith's busy winning it in 22, Mark Harmon is getting himself a top 10. Brian Harmon, getting a top 10. And then the very next year, Harmon wins it, and then Xander Schauffele is busy getting a tied 19th, tied 17th on 23 and 22, and then ends up winning in 24. So you see this pattern where the previous year they finished top 33 or better, usually top 20 or better before jumping over and getting into the winners. So course history, very, very important for the Open Championship and Royal Part Rush in general. So let's take a look at the results. So my model, like I said, is cumulative, and it's a lower score is better, just like in golf. So we'll start with our number one guy, no surprise, Scottie Scheffler with a 53. Top performer, top player in the world, all around, just great, great golfer. So it's hard to find any weakness regardless of what metrics you're using. So he's almost always number one every week. This is a little differently with Open Championships, with live golfers, analyzing their stats and then trying to make it transferable to the PGA contenders and make it even was interesting, but I think it actually went really well, and we have a few live golfers scattered in throughout the top 16 I went to this week. We went a little deeper for the Open Championship. All right, number 3, surprised me, but didn't surprise me. Henley's been having great finishes. He's just been a great all-around golfer lately, really getting the job done. Nick Taylor, even bigger surprise, but he's kind of like a Russell Henley, but maybe not quite as good right now. He doesn't quite do everything quite as well as Henley does, but he's kind of like the light version. I was surprised to see him fourth up in the rankings, but he made the rankings last week as well. He's been playing some really, really good golf. The kind of guy that can just get it through the course, get it on the green, make it. And then Sepp Straka. He is a little unlike the other two before him, but he's been playing great golf. Great iron player, really helps for the approach, the greens and regulation stat. So I can see Sepp Straka doing really, really, really well this week. All right, and so after the first tier there, we have two other tiers. Like I said, we go to 16 people, and I split it up in between contenders up to 275 points, and then long shots 275 to 300. And just a reminder, this is not betting odds. This is just titles I'm kind of using for how they scored on my model specifically. So the top of the contenders is Bryson DeChambeau. He scored well. Bit of a bomber, but scored obviously well enough in the other stats to push him up towards the top. Can't say I'm a big believer at the Open for him, but that's just where the model put him. Chris Goddard's been playing some amazing golf. He's also kind of a bomber, but scores well in the other metrics besides fairway accuracy or driving accuracy percentage. And Rory McIlroy is kind of like the finish. This is like ended up being a little group of bombers here where they have, they're super long off the tee, but they're good in the greens and regs, and they're pretty good at the scrambling. Their weakness is the fairway percentage, but that being the least weighted stat this week, their other stats were able to push them up. But it's like this group of bombers that all end up just kind of settling in the model right there in that spot. And then we have Ben Griffin, an example of another good all-around golfer that's been playing really good golf this year. Shane Lowry, the previous winner, last year's top 10, he really benefited from the course history part of the model, gaining points that way. And then our final contender, which surprised me, the true only short game putter that made the list this week is Harry Hall. But the other aspects of his game, like greens and regulation, his scrambling is great. In driving accuracy percentage, were good enough to where he stayed up there. And I'm actually really excited to see this kind of mix of contenders showing a little bit of a mix of bombers with the good all-around players that were kind of more on the upper tier of the list, and mixed in with one just kind of short game putter player. Love it. So as far as my longer shots, like I said, this is just more of the point thing and how I divided it up. Collin Morikawa, he won it, a few years ago, much different course. He's in a much different place, but, he made the list. Tom McKibben, gotta admit, I don't know much about the young lad playing on the LIV Tour, but his play has warranted. He was in the key statistics. He was doing well enough to make it onto the list. And then Robert McIntyre, Bobby Mack getting on the list at 284. Not a surprise. This is kind of his home area locals. Him and Lowry being the local guys from the UK. Another one, Patrick Cantlay, kind of good all around. A couple of T12s recently. Not super inspiring, but yeah, that's what the model popped out. And then the final entrant on my model this year who had a score under 300 was Joaquin Niemann, who has been lighting up the LIV Golf Tour this year like crazy. And he does well in other championships, generally speaking, just not the Open, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. So that was my list of 16 I went to this week, just because of being a championship. I went a little bit deeper. And then so let's go ahead and stack up their finishing positions in my model versus their betting odds. So on the left-hand side, we have them listed in order of their score on my model. And then we have their betting odds going across here from left to right. Let's just focus on the winner numbers right now. So I narrowed down this list of 16 to 6 golfers I'm going to be placing bets on. I eliminated 5 immediately because odds versus their position on the board, and then another 5 I eliminated for other reasons. So let's go through that really quick. The 5 that I eliminated because they're odds. From the favorites category, Scheffler and Rahm. Obviously, either one could win. Both have had top 10 finishes in the last years. They fit the history. I just don't like the odds and can't get myself to pull the trigger on that low odds. Bryson DeChambeau and Rory McIlroy from the second group. McIlroy could win this thing. I don't see DeChambeau as much winning in this thing, but they have the odds like they're going to win. I just don't think they fit well enough for what they scored on my model. And then finally, from the long shot category, Colin Morikawa, I'm going to eliminate. He has the lowest odds of that category. He has the kind of game, obviously, the model showed to fit this course, but not sure where he's at mentally with the caddy nonsense that's been going on and switching up and all those sorts of things. So I just don't really trust him this week. And so the other 5 that I eliminated for other reasons we'll go over right now as well. So from the strong contender group, I eliminated 2 other players, Chris Gotterup and Ben Griffin, and that's for the historical reasons. They just have never had any success at this tournament or never played it before, and the data just shows that you need to have some sort of success or play this before to really have a top finish or win. And then from the long shots category, I removed 3 other players. I only end up keeping 1 player from this category. And I eliminate Tom McKibben. I just don't trust his youth. Tied 50th one time here, so youth and experience just not jiving with the Open Championship. And then the bottom 2, Cantlay and Neiman, I also eliminated. Cantlay, I just not inspired by that number or his play. I can't see him actually winning or a top 10, possibly sneaking in the top 25 again, but just not comfortable betting him in that number. And then Neiman, although he has been doing great this year and does great in majors and championships, he doesn't do great at the Open Championship. This link style courses seem to have his number, so I really don't like him at a 50-1 to win this thing at all. So with that being said, that leaves us with 6 golfers this week that I will be placing bets on. Russell Henley, Nick Taylor, Seb Straka, Shane Lowry, Harry Hall, and Robert McIntyre. I very much unintentionally went with an international flair this week. So let's take a look at what the final betting might look like. So in this slide, we're talking about guys that can actually win it, that fit the mold, and then we'll give you a couple of first-round leader possibilities here. All right, so the first-round leader, both sides of the pond, I mean this geographically and odds-wise. First, from the U.S., we got Scotty Scheffler. It's only 14-1, but he is number 2 in the first-round scoring average. So along with everything else that he's amazing at first-round scoring average too. And I just like him more than the 450 to win. So if I'm going to bet Scheffler, it's going to be for the first-round leader and the idea that he's just going to come out and show the world like why he's Scotty Scheffler, why he's better than everyone else, and dominate this course from like beginning to end. Definitely a strong possibility. And then we have Harry Hall at plus 8,000 first-round leader. He is number 3 in first-round scoring average, and if he can keep it in the fairway, second shot to the green, he's the one player on my list where that putter could come out hot and he could put up an amazing score in the first round. So that's what I'm looking at for possibilities of first-round leader, definitely leaning way heavier towards Harry Hall as my first-round leader pick. And then the guys that actually fit the mold that I feel can win this list out of the 6 I have it down to. So the 4 guys that fit the profile, they have age and history and the odds to win this thing, that I like to pick to win this thing. So my number 1 guy, Russell Henley. Obviously, profile did great on the model. He's that age of winners at 36 years old, that 30, 35 range, 35 give or take range. And he has the history where he had a top 10 last year. And I love his odds. So all in all, Russell Henley is like my player of the week, my pick of the week, my guy of the week, that I just love his model score versus his odds, and just I think he's a great value this week. We'll follow that up with Seb Straka. Not too much of a surprise. Like I said, he scored well in the model. He's 32 around the age. He has the history of scoring at these events. He's having a great year, and I like those odds at plus 5,000, 50-1. I love those odds for Straka. And then guys that I really can see them winning, but I don't love as much because their odds are the more local guys, Lowry and McIntyre. And Vegas seems to think that they're more likely to win too. That's what their odds are saying anyways. And I really think it's just more that Lowry winning in 2019 and Robert Mack being from the area kind of thing. They're being known as pretty successful links players. But I could definitely see them winning, and I think the odds are okay enough to where you could place a bet on them. And then finally, the last 2 guys, I don't think I can pick them to win. I love their numbers. I love their odds, particularly Nick Taylor versus his score that he had this week in the model. But That being said, they don't have that history where they have a successful finish before. Like, rarely in the Open does someone come in for the first time or never finish well before and just come in and spike it. So, love their number, love their score, love the player. They just don't have that history at the Open that you need, that I think you need to get a win. So, what does this all look at like in the final? So this is the way I see it. This is the Twist ticket, my best bets. Like I said, it's the international edition. And so let's take a look here. So my value picks. I talked about Russell Henley is my favorite value pick of the week, and Seb Straka. And those will be my two of my winners that I pick in my favorite value picks of the week. And then for top fives, we'll be taking Harry Hall and Nick Taylor, just because Taylor's odds for top five are almost as good as a win for some people. So we're going to check that out and believe in the model that Taylor can have that first high finish, which might even propel him next year to get the win. That's kind of how I'm looking at Hall and Taylor. They're capable of getting that top finish or that high finish, not the win. And then, like I said, favoring the locals, Lowry and McIntyre to win, probably just throwing a little bit on those guys. And so I ended up with an Austrian, an American, an Englishman, a Canadian, an Irishman, and a Scotsman. Lots of flair there. So we got the locals with Hall, Lowry, McIntyre, and then we got the international guys a little more with Straka, Henley, and Taylor. And then just one final thing here, just because I am a stack better, I really, I want to take advantage of the fact that these guys are scoring good in the model, and if maybe they don't get to the winner top five, we can still get some winnings, just like Straka getting 7th place last week for the top 10. So if you're going to stack them, I'd go with Lowry, McIntyre for the top 5 in the winner. Not sure if I'm going to stack those guys because of the odds being a little bit lower, but I'll pick one of those bets. But I'm absolutely going to finish Straka and Henley's stack at top 10 and then finish Hall and Taylor's top 5s with top 20s, like I had done previously the week before with Taylor and you. It just seems to be working out well for me. So that's it for the inaugural edition of Twist Sport, the way I see it. If there's any players you have questions about that I haven't covered, go ahead and just leave a question in the comments and I'll get to it as soon as I can. If you have any other questions about DFS or anything like that, go ahead and just slap something in the comments and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you found this valuable or you like this so far, go ahead and give it a like and maybe subscribe, especially if you start to follow me and we're having some success. That'd be great. But otherwise, I appreciate you for joining me. We'll be coming out with more weekly videos for the tournaments coming up. And I really wish you a successful betting weekend. And I hope you enjoy the Open Championship. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the way I see it.